On October 13th, 2006, President George W. Bush signs the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act, essentially piggybacked on the back of the SafePort Act, which, and I quote, prohibits gambling business from knowingly accepting payments in connection with the participation of another person in a bet or wager that involves the use of the internet and that is unlawful under any federal or state law. When this bill gets signed, tell me about like the initial, like the first moment you find out that this bill is getting signed into law, and what the potential ramifications are for the business.
Well, wasn't it, I think it was just sometime during the day of, was it September 29th?
I believe so.
So I remember sometime in the afternoon on the 29th that I found out that it was going to be attached to the bill that had to pass. And it was a shock.
Party poker pulls out of the market. I mean, it was rather swift, if I recall, in terms of companies making quick decisions to pull out of the U.S. market. Full Tilt stays, PokerStars stays, and quite a few others stay in the mix. Mm-hmm. What goes into the company's decision to stay in the United States?
Well, look, it was a pretty simple process. We knew that just because Party Poker left, that doesn't mean that it was the correct decision to leave or that we were the same as Party Poker. They were a company that had offered a lot of different kinds of games, house bank games. As far as PokerStars and Full Tilt are concerned, privately held companies that had never offered anything but poker in their entire history. And so you don't want to make a rash decision. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty permanent decision to stay or leave, correct? So the company, I'm sure Stars did the same thing, sought legal opinions from very reputable attorneys. It's not like we were scouring the malls, the strip malls of Vegas for attorneys. You're going to Washington and actually Vegas. Vegas in more formal settings, there are some great gaming attorneys here. And, you really had to look at the law and what it had to say about poker. And it didn't say anything about poker. And so then you're really left with, them now trying to interpret what this law means for poker. It's not obvious by reading the bill, certainly to a layman like me. And we didn't ever receive any opinions to the contrary. A real hard reading of the bill and what we did, our business, when we got legal opinions, they were all unanimous that the UIGA did not cover poker.
Was this, it's a pretty major decision in the company's history.
Absolutely.
Was there a member vote?
There was no need for a member vote.
Because
members were not suggesting that we should leave the country.
So essentially, everyone was on board then?
Everyone? I can't speak for everyone.
Or the majority or the general feelings?
There was no, like we talked earlier about like Perry Friedman and
right.
John Jawanda and there was no struggle.
No struggle.
There was zero struggle. I'm not saying it was unanimous, but there was zero struggle. And look, any member that believed that it was a terrible mistake to stay in the United States could have just said, here are my shares, I'm leaving. Mm-hmm. At any time. No one did.
Obviously, the biggest hurdle in the U.S. post-UIGEA was clearly the payment processing, the financial transactions between players and the company and the players in the bank. How did the system change from 2006 to 2007? And who was in charge of the company's payment processing at the time? And how aware of this were you?
Payment processing wasn't a part of my daily duties. I know that there was a change from 2006 where I think the only ACH processing was with NetTeller. I think they had some I'm not sure the name of it, it's like InstaTeller or something like that. but some kind of an ACH, sort of instant deposit product. That might have been back in 2005. I don't even know when, but I'd heard about it. But what I can tell you is that it went from there, and then after UIGEA, there were different processors offering ACH, and I would hear about them here or there, but it wasn't my area. And I can tell you that whenever I heard about a new payment processor offering ACH, I was assured by Ray and company counsel that those processors and those payments were transparent, that the banks knew.
To your knowledge, was there a secure, like a background check with the company into the various payment processors that were being brought?
I don't know. I'm going to assume that there was some vetting, but I don't know. So I'd be speculating. Again, this is really all I want to say about that particular issue. I didn't know you'd be asking me to speculate at this point. I can tell you what I do know, and that is that I was always told by the company that they thought that these transactions were transparent to the banks. And then I can offer you one other fact that I know, and that is when I was in Dublin after April 15th. At some point, I'm just sort of having a casual conversation with Ray, and I'm just saying, what's up with these banks that were named in the indictment? And he said, oh no, they were absolutely transparent. And I said, well, okay. And he opened up a drawer. He had a drawer with a transparency letter. And the letter was on the letterhead from the bank, from I think the president of the bank or I don't know, some officer of the bank, that said that the bank had a legal opinion that processing poker transactions was legal, and that they knew they were processing poker transactions for this particular processor. I don't remember which bank or anything, but I know that, that's, as far as that particular relationship, I know that was a transparent one.
It was...
I found out about it after the fact.
Sure.
But I was always being told it was transparent, and now I was shown that, at least as it relates to that one particular relationship, and I assume others, it was transparent.
In regards to banks, it was stated in the indictment against Ray and Nelson specifically that the company developed relationships with banks on the verge of failure, often investing in the bank as a sort of fee to process transactions kind of with a blind eye. Is there anything you can say about that, or were you aware of this?
Well, I don't believe that that's what Full Tilt did. I don't think Full Tilt invested in any of these banks.
Okay.
That I'm aware of. I don't know. But I don't think that Full Tilt ever did. And I would disagree with that characterization, but I don't know. Could have happened.
Can you talk at all about Daniel Cvetkov and what your recollection of a relationship, if any, the company or you in particular had with him?
Never spoken to, I have no recollection of him. I have nothing to say about him.
Okay. Obviously, Cvetkov becomes the one of the people that many believe to be has turned on the essentially kind of taking himself out of harm's way by revealing information he had on Full Tilt.
Yeah, I never met with a payment processor during my entire time at the company or after I left, short of, I remember one time at a party, Ray saying, hey, meet so-and-so, he's processing with us. And I said hi. That wasn't what I did. I didn't meet any of these people. I didn't have a relationship with any of them.
Did you know that Full Tilt was attempting to sue Cvetkov at a point, or Intabill?
Oh, I heard about that, yeah.
And then eventually that was rumored that Full Tilt actually tipped off that he was in the United States to the FBI and was influential in having him actually arrested.
might be the case. I don't know.
On March 17th, 2008, according to the DOJ indictment against Ray Bitar and Nelson Burtnick, a customer emailed Full Tilt Poker to say that, and I quote, he was very concerned about the risk of depositing money, and he asked, is my money that I have in my Full Tilt account held in trust? The next day, it said the customer service representative forwarded the email to Ray and CC1, or co-conspirator number 1. Did you receive this email in particular, and can you confirm or deny that you are, in fact, co-conspirator number 1?
Well, I'm not going to confirm or deny who co-conspirator 1 is, but I can confirm that I did get that email, and it was an important email to me. Mm-hmm. Even though it wasn't my area, and as we've discussed before, I really hadn't given it a lot of thought. But by March of 2008, I knew that I was going to resign from the company in September of 2008. Mm-hmm. And it was a question that I wanted an answer to. Not the actual question, because I knew the answer to the actual question, which is my money held in a trust account, or in trust?
In trust.
In trust, yeah. And I knew that wasn't the case. Mm-hmm. But I thought it was very important that the company did provide that customer an accurate and good answer to his question. So I think I just responded with something like, we need to provide this customer a good answer to this question. I'm not sure.
Who was in on the process in terms of the
mostly company counsel, mm-hmm. But I was certainly aware of like balance sheets again, as mm-hmm. I had said, in terms of cash coverage. But I had never seen a financial document within the company that just answered that question. Do we have more cash in company accounts than we have in player liability? A balance sheet is a balance sheet. That's a very different question. And so I asked the finance department to answer that specific question. And I think I don't recall exact dates, but I believe an answer was provided to that customer a few weeks later.
Ray responded to the customer service representative at first, stating the best we can say is we keep 100% of player funds in segregated accounts. Funds will always be available to players 24 hours a day after a reasonable fraud check. Mm-hmm. The best we can say, it doesn't insinuate to me, the best we can say kind of, I'm not feeling too good, at the validity at that point of the financial kind of segregation of accounts, if Ray's kind of saying the best we can say.
Yeah, but look, I believe that statement was correct at that time. Mm-hmm. I think when he says the best we can say, he's referring to the customer's question about trust accounts. Mm-hmm. So clearly the answer didn't give this customer any indication that there was a trust account holding that customer's money. But again, I don't know. Those are his words in an mm-hmm. email.
Right.
I just think it's easy to take that particular email out of context. All I cared about was to provide that customer a correct answer, but also that I had confidence that it was a correct answer.
I mean, we're almost 5 full years past the kind of formation of the company mm-hmm. here. And it seems as if this is almost one of the first really important moments of saying, like, hey, is this handled, in a way that makes sense to our customers? And, was it the first customer? I mean, obviously you're not responding to every customer email.
I don't know.
I can't.
I had never seen the question before, asked by a customer. I just don't know. I just know that that email did come across my inbox, and it might be an email that, I mean, I'm dealing with so many other things that have nothing to do with this area of the company. For whatever reason, I saw it as an important question that needed to be answered accurately. And so in the March, April, probably into May timeframe, I endeavored to have the company financial department be able to produce a document that could answer the fundamental question, which is, did we have more cash on hand in our various accounts than we owed our customers? And that wasn't necessarily the easiest document to produce, at least for the finance department. They had never had to do that particular document. But I believe that by the early summer of 2008, that document was being produced on a weekly basis, at least monthly.
Did the AGCC at all? I mean, you mentioned the finance department had difficulty putting together such a document or putting together the.
But again, it's a
data.
very specialized document. You know, there's a balance sheet and then there's this thing. That was just, they'd never been asked to do that.
What did, if you do have knowledge of this, and you know, you weren't the key license holder of the AGCC, so this might not be something that you know, but what kind of audits or transparency was the Full Tilt Finance Department giving the AGCC at this time when they're trying to cross-check whether or not 100% of player accounts are held and available?
Well, I think you have your times off. Kanawaki was our regulator in 2008.
Okay.
I believe there was some, I was actually looking back on this, and I just recently read the Alderney report. It mentions some license that the company got in 2007.
There was
But
licenses
I don't
held
know.
by.
But I don't know what that license is actually, and I don't think it was.
Well, I mean, the
I
question.
don't think they were regulating the company. I believe that, and I'm not 100% sure. I think that 2007 license may have been just for UK.
Well, the relevance of the question, whether it's AGCC
Right.
or Kanawaki, it's
Oh,
still there's an
yeah.
audit process, and the finance team is supposed to be providing documents to back up
Right.
player deposits. I mean, so the idea that it's the first time that an executive team is and they're having difficulty putting together these numbers, it would seem that would kind of set off a little bit of a red flag or an alarm that this is potentially something we need to really, really pay attention to.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wanted that document to be produced and to be accurate. I wasn't a key license holder with Kanawaki or Alderney. I never spoke to either regulator, ever. I wasn't part of the compliance with those regulators. I really don't even know what compliance procedures there were in place with Kanawaki at all. I now, after reading the Alderney report, I have some idea, I guess. But there were reports being furnished to those regulators, and I don't think, or certainly the finance department would have had an easier time answering my question. I doubt very much that Kanawaki ever asked for a cash coverage report, a report that simply asked that question. I'm sure they asked for balance sheets all the time, or on whatever regular basis that you were supposed to provide those documents, but I just don't know.
The email chain kind of goes back and forth a little bit. Full Tilt, the customer service rep, did respond. And then the customer emailed seeking further clarification as to whether player funds are held in segregated accounts which can't be used by the company itself. Again, reviewed by Ray, and he approved the following draft, which stated, players' funds at Full Tilt Poker are kept in several deposit accounts throughout the world. all of which are separate and distinct from our operating accounts. Funds are transferred from player deposit accounts to FTP operating accounts only after we have earned them. This is not done each time FTP earns a rake or even daily, but as FTP's earnings accumulate, we make periodic transfers of earnings from the deposit accounts to the operating accounts, from which we pay outside expenses, Full Tilt employees, and ultimately shareholders of the company. Again, to me, it's a very well thought out, well written email, and it details very clearly the safety of player accounts, and this time almost the process in which Full Tilt Poker is paying itself out of these accounts once it earns the money. Was there ever a time, to your understanding, that this process was not in fact used, or were you aware, or when this email was written, how did that kind of conversation of the process of depositing money from player accounts into operating accounts to get?
I don't recall that particular email. I don't know that I ever saw that email. Mm-hmm. I know I didn't write that email. It seems like an odd email, actually. It's very extensive. Though I think in 2008 it was probably accurate. It just seems like an odd email.
Yeah.
To me. I don't know. I may have seen it and approved it. But I don't know. I don't think so. Because that seems like an odd email to me. Mm-hmm. Just sort of in its level of detail, but I mean, that is what a poker company does.
Sure.
It's sort of describing what a poker company does.
Right.
Right? As long as you have sort of an operating account that isn't, where the money goes into that operating account, then it's used to pay expenses. And then when you do your sort of audit of all your other accounts, you have more than enough money in all your other accounts. Mm-hmm. That would seem to be an accurate email. It just seems like an odd email to me.
Again, this is all according to the DOJ indictment against Bitar and Burtnick. But on March 23, Ray emails CC1 and FTP counsel, general counsel, and says that the company needs a good canned response for the one or two guys who write in a month. And he went on to say, and this is a quote, "Bottom line is, we are not a bank, even though we might act like one, and therefore customer funds will always be at risk." Customer funds will always be at risk. Again, this is a fairly strongly worded email in terms of, obviously I don't have the full context of the email, that's not available, but a statement like customer funds will always be at risk. How at that point, when the CEO kind of, to me, that doesn't seem like something that I would feel comfortable with, working or trusting a guy that's literally saying my customers' player funds will always be at risk.
I don't believe that's what he was saying there.
What do you believe he was saying?
I think he's just saying, look, maybe somehow someday the DOJ just, it's possible. You just never know, this isn't like a bank with FDIC insurance. Maybe it's possible that somehow, the company gets shut down and all the bank accounts get seized or something. There's a legal risk to the company.
So you don't feel that he actually was inferring that, hey, we're operating with customer funds here, and that,
I don't think so, no. I really don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Who had access to the accounts that were listed in the documents? I mean, was it simply just the CFO and Ray? I mean, who
It was the accounting team. I don't know. It was just the accounting team would gather up all the information necessary to produce the report.
And so when you're reviewing the document and you're looking at, the numbers being provided to you, I mean, is there a system at all of checks and balances, or is it just, we've hired good people, these are accurate numbers, we're going to move forward and trust that these are true?
I certainly made it clear what I wanted to go into that report. Mm-hmm. Very early on in the process, I might have sat down even with one of them and just sort of said, okay, now where does this number come from? kind of thing. You know, again, I'm not a trained accountant, but I wanted to make sure that the numbers that I was looking at were accurate. And it was explained to me. And then there was this report, and I trusted this report. I had no reason not to trust this report. I think the final decision to leave was probably more in the fall of 2007. I initially had agreed to work for 2 years. And then I believe I agreed to 3 more, but I'm not sure of that. But I know that, and I'm not even sure what my contract looked like or if I even had a contract with a company. But I know that I hadn't made a commitment beyond September of 2008. It was kind of like on a, we thought about, the work at the company in terms of years. And at some point in the fall of 2007, I just thought it was time to move on. I think the initial response from the board was, well, we need to find a Howard replacement. We need kind of like a COO kind of person. Go out, maybe snatch a top-level executive from another gaming company or find someone else with a lot of experience and bring someone in who's going to sort of take on that same kind of role, sort of below Ray, handle. As I recall, the conversations were more along the lines of, someone who truly had experience handling a company of that size. That was really the concern, was dealing with just the size, the structure, the different departments and keeping it all working and functioning smoothly and maintaining a decent corporate culture. The board asked that there be an attempt to try and locate who that person might be during this transition. What ended up happening was Ray did bring in a lot of senior managers, some good people, some people with experience in the industry. I think that the company started to grow up just from a management process point of view. Definitely some good people were brought in. But I obviously regret very much that the company never brought in that O-level person.
Would you say that due to these circumstances and due to this, just the way things went, that you and Rafe felt handcuffed to the board?
I would say so, yes. Rafe more than me. I'm not saying like I was saying I want out, but I would have welcomed a change, I think. Chris never, look, this is Chris's baby. He was chairman of the board. He was never going anywhere. And Ray, as long as he was CEO, was never going to go anywhere.
Did Ray ever express concern in losing you on the board or losing Rafe on the board in terms of, potentially worrying about, the idea that some of the early chatter about him, those that were unhappy with Ray could potentially take seats on the board and,
Look, of course, people like to feel comfortable with the people that, are sort of providing their oversight, I guess you would call it. So I don't think that Ray would have been thrilled if all of a sudden John Jawanda or Perry was on the board, but if they were elected, they would have been elected and they would have had a voice. That's, that kind of conflict, as long as this constructive conflict is healthy for a company. Look, where we really misstepped, I think, as a board and as an ownership, is that we should have recognized, it's so obvious looking back on it now. My greatest regret in all of this is that we we're operating as a California LLC. We're a Dublin company, you know, but the ultimate ownership is still this California LLC, and it's using an operating agreement that was crafted for a startup in 2003. You know, and that's our inexperience, and that was our laziness, I guess.